This is a dramatic reconstruction of a seemingly ordinary morning that spiraled into a high-stakes rescue. We begin our story on a Tuesday, approximately 11:15 a.m., inside the Daily Grind, a place of predictable coffee orders and routine chaos. Our focus is Maya, 22, quick on her feet and a veteran of the morning rush. She was just finishing wiping down table 7, a small four-top near the back window, when the stillness of her routine was shattered, not by a sound but by a chilling absence of it. The typical diner noise, the hiss of the espresso machine, the clatter of ceramic, the low hum of conversation, suddenly seemed to press in, highlighting the anomaly at table 3. Take a look at what happened. Sitting across from a large unkempt man was a boy, no older than 5, clutching a plastic toy spaceship. This wasn't unusual. Families came in all the time, but this child wasn't acting like a typical bored kid waiting for pancakes. He was crying, silent tears streaming down his face, the kind of deep, internal distress that kids try desperately to hide from adults they fear. The man, later identified as Marcus Thorne, had his back mostly to the room, but his posture, rigid and leaning slightly over the child, suggested dominance, not comfort. Maya saw the details the other patrons missed: a faint red mark on the child's wrist, and the way Marcus's oversized hand completely eclipsed the boy's shoulder when he gave it a purportedly reassuring squeeze. Maya, who had spent years observing human behavior in a high-stress service environment, recognized the cold geometry of a power imbalance instantly, a situation demanding not judgment but immediate, calculated action. Her mind, trained to prioritize and execute tasks, shifted from remembering coffee orders to calculating risk. She couldn't call the police yet. She had no proof, only an unnerving feeling, and a false alarm could escalate the danger for the boy. Her first move needed to be an intrusion, a deliberate breach of their tense bubble under the guise of service. She took a deep breath, straightened her apron, and grabbed a clean cloth and the coffee pot. This was the moment where the mundane reality of her job intersected violently with an emerging, terrifying truth. She was not just a waitress serving caffeine. She was the last line of defense for a small, silently weeping child, and the clock was ticking down to a sudden, unknown deadline. The unsettling tableau, the man's casual aggression versus the boy's quiet despair, was now firmly fixed in her mind, demanding the next step in this slow-motion, high-stakes confrontation. The scene was set, and the line between customer service and crisis intervention was about to be obliterated. Maya advanced on table 3, a forced, professional smile fixed in place, but her gaze was locked on the boy, her internal alarms blaring a high-pitched, silent warning. The coffee pot was her prop, her shield, her excuse. "More coffee, sir?" she asked, her voice deliberately bright, breaking the tense silence. Marcus Thorne looked up, and the look in his eyes, not annoyance at the interruption, but a flash of contained rage, confirmed Maya's darkest fears. His eyes were cold, flat, and they lingered on Maya's name tag just a beat too long, assessing her as a threat. The boy, who we now know was 5-year-old Leo, flinched, shrinking further into the booth corner. Thorne's reaction was immediate and aggressive, delivered in a low, controlled growl that was far more menacing than a shout. "We're fine, thanks," he clipped, making no attempt to look at the coffee pot or Maya, his focus remaining fixed on keeping Leo docile. Maya knew she couldn't retreat now. The interruption had opened the conversation, and to simply walk away would be to concede victory to the man. She pivoted her strategy in milliseconds, focusing not on confrontation, but on information gathering and a quiet alert. She leaned in slightly, as if to wipe a non-existent spill, and in a voice meant only for the boy, she murmured, "Leo, is everything okay? You look sad." The use of his name was a risk, but it elicited a crucial micro-reaction. Leo's eyes, wide and terrified, flickered towards her, then immediately back to Thorne, a clear signal of fear and control. Thorne stiffened, his jaw clenching. He pushed his empty plate forward, a classic dismissal. "Look, we're done here. Don't hover." But before he could fully dismiss her, Maya executed her pre-planned subtle maneuver. As she pretended to wipe the table, her hand brushed the edge of the boy's placemat. Hidden beneath a napkin was the check she had just delivered to a nearby table. She used the motion to slip her own phone, already unlocked, and with the camera app open, into the space beside the booth wall, aimed loosely towards their table, and the man's shoes. It was clumsy, imperfect, but a desperate act to capture any evidence. The lie she needed to tell was simple and dangerous. "Oh, sorry, sir, that's spilled sugar. I'll just get you the check now." She quickly retreated, her heart hammering against her ribs, the pretense of normalcy a brittle mask. As Maya reached the counter, Marcus Thorne stood up abruptly, yanking Leo up by the arm, causing the boy to gasp in pain. The toy spaceship fell to the floor and rolled under the table. Forgotten, Thorne did not pay. He just walked out, pulling the boy swiftly towards the door, his rapid, powerful stride making it impossible for the small child to keep pace. The suddenness of their departure was the final, terrifying confirmation Maya needed. They were gone, and the phone she'd hidden, now recording the empty booth and the man's final, hurried exit, confirmed the danger was real and the chase was on. The sudden, forced departure of Marcus Thorne and young Leo triggered Maya's adrenaline, overriding the practiced politeness of her server persona. The action was immediate and primal. Forget the abandoned coffee pot and the perplexed look of her co-worker, Tony. This was no longer a matter of customer service, but a matter of life or death for the small, silent victim she had just watched disappear. Maya vaulted over the counter access point, a clear violation of company rules, snatching her hidden phone on the way. The video feed showing the final blurred image of Thorne's retreating back. She burst out the front door and onto the busy midday sidewalk. The scene outside was a rush of downtown traffic, a dizzying array of cars and hurried pedestrians, and for a terrifying second, she lost them. Then she saw him, Thorne, dragging the small boy by the elbow, heading not towards a nearby bus stop or parking garage, but directly towards a secluded alleyway between the diner and a dry cleaner's shop. This detailed the choice of the alley over the main street, screamed intent. It was an evasion tactic, a clear move to disappear Leo from public sight. Maya immediately pulled out her own phone, the memory of Leo's tear-stained face and the red mark on his wrist, a furious fuel in her lungs. As she moved to follow, keeping a safe distance, she dialed the non-emergency police number first, but the delay was unacceptable. She disconnected and called 911, urgency overriding protocol. "I need police at the Daily Grind, 432 Elm Street right now," she gasped into the receiver, her voice shaking but firm. "I'm following a man who just abducted a small boy. He's dragging him into the alley, behind the dry cleaner. Suspect is large, unkempt, brown jacket. The boy is wearing a blue shirt and clutching a spaceship toy." The dispatcher, trained for crisis, demanded a vehicle description. Maya, now peering around the corner of the brick wall into the dark, refuse-scented alley, saw it, a rusted dark green sedan, its engine already running, waiting near the back exit. Thorne was forcing Leo into the back seat. The boy resisted, kicking out weakly, and Thorne delivered a swift, brutal shove. The car, it's a late 90s dark green sedan, heavily rusted on the passenger side door. Maya yelled into the phone, her memory locking onto the precise, critical detail that would crack the case wide open. She focused on the license plate, the crucial investigative detail. The specific sequence burned itself into her mind just as Thorne slid into the driver's seat and the car lurched violently backward, tires screeching as it pulled out of the alley and sped down the back lane. Maya recited the plate number to the dispatcher 3 times, her voice ringing with finality, and then she stood alone, trembling, surrounded by the sudden quiet of the aftermath. Her actions in those 90 seconds, the quick call, the immediate follow-up, the precise license plate recall, had already sealed Marcus Thorne's fate and delivered the necessary evidence to law enforcement. The chase was over, but the rescue had just begun. Maya's swift and detailed call became the primary evidence in the immediate police response, confirming the wisdom of her immediate action. We now move to the rapid, decisive response by the city's uniformed division. The license plate number, N897JQ, transmitted via police radio, was instantly flagged by citywide traffic cameras, creating an immediate perimeter. Thorne's rusted green sedan, captured just 3 blocks from the Daily Grind, was tracked heading toward the highway on-ramp, confirming the attempt to flee the jurisdiction. The response was clinical and overwhelming. A patrol unit intercepted the vehicle just as it reached the on-ramp, executing a high-risk traffic stop based on the confirmed abduction. Thorne was apprehended without incident, and Leo, the 5-year-old in the blue shirt, was recovered, visibly shaken, but physically unharmed beyond the original mark on his wrist. Maya was still standing in the alleyway when the first responding officer, a seasoned detective named Miller, found her, her face pale, her hands still shaking. She was brought into the precinct, not as a suspect, but as the critical witness whose detailed account had saved the child. Her transition from waitress to linchpin of an abduction case was complete. In the sterile environment of the interrogation room, which was in reality a simple witness interview room, Maya recounted the entire sequence: the boy's silent tears, the cold, flat look of Marcus Thorne, the forced departure, and the crucial license plate. Detective Miller informed her of the investigative digression. Marcus Thorne was not a stranger, but a disgruntled uncle of the boy, Leo Vance, who had recently lost a bitter custody battle with Leo's mother. Thorne had a history of domestic violence and instability, and the abduction was a desperate final act of malice and control, proving Maya's intuition about the high-stakes danger was tragically accurate. The boy was safe, now being cared for by Child Protective Services, while the mother was located. Maya, exhausted and emotionally drained, signed her statement. The relief was a heavy, physical weight, the kind that almost buckles your knees. She had done the right thing. She had seen the danger where others saw only a man and a child, and she had acted decisively. As she left the precinct in the late afternoon, the setting sun casting long cinematic shadows, she was just Maya, the tired waitress again, but inside something had fundamentally shifted. She had faced true malice and responded with quiet, ferocious bravery, saving a child whose identity, beyond the name Leo Vance, was still unknown to her. Her mind, however, was already moving to the next challenge: how to face the breakfast rush tomorrow, knowing that the most dramatic event of her life had just taken place between the coffee station and the cash register. She knew she was due back at 6, and the world, despite her heroism, still demanded its lattes and pancakes. The following morning, Maya's return to the daily grind was an exercise in controlled performance. She was, unbeknownst to her, a local sensation. The news had briefly flashed the story: quick-thinking waitress foils kidnapping, and while her name wasn't widely published, her face, captured by a security camera angle as she exited the alley, was circulating among the downtown workers. Maya, however, was attempting to be invisible, focusing intensely on the rhythmic, predictable demands of her job. Finding solace in the routine that had nearly been destroyed, she polished silverware with unnecessary vigor, keeping her eyes down, avoiding the curious, whispered glances from a few morning regulars. The tension wasn't from the public attention, though. It was the inevitable return of her boss, Clara Vance. Clara Vance was a study in high-octane efficiency, the owner of 3 successful daily grind franchises, known for her sharp business acumen and an intimidatingly cold, focused demeanor. She was always impeccably dressed, her severity a contrast to the diner's comfortable kitsch, and she rarely smiled, treating the floor like a military operation. Maya had always respected Clara, but she also feared her, knowing that Clara had zero tolerance for drama or disruption. Maya was half an hour into her shift when Clara Vance walked through the back door, wearing a severe black suit that seemed to absorb the weak morning light. Clara didn't exchange pleasantries. Her face was drawn, pale, and etched with an exhaustion that went beyond a simple lack of sleep. It was the look of a person who had spent a night fighting a desperate emotional war. She walked directly past the coffee station, her gaze sweeping over the room with a practiced managerial intensity that made Maya instinctively stand up straighter. Clara then paused, her eyes finally landing on Maya, and the flat, unreadable look was replaced by something complex and unsettling, a mixture of scrutiny and profound vulnerability. Without a word, Clara used a sharp, precise gesture of her index finger to summon Maya into the tiny office tucked away near the storage closet. The pacing shifted immediately from the rapid-fire chaos of the rescue to the slow, agonizing beat of an impending private confrontation. Maya's mind raced. Was she about to be reprimanded for leaving her post, fired for causing a police scene? She took off her apron, folded it neatly, and followed her boss, the silence of the walk amplifying the sound of her own heartbeat. As the heavy solid wood door closed behind them, sealing them off from the comforting noise of the diner, Clara Vance sat down, not behind her desk, but on the edge of it, her hands clasped tightly. This was not the posture of a manager delivering a performance review. This was the posture of a woman barely holding herself together, a clear signal that this conversation would be about something far deeper than scheduling or spills, and Maya braced herself for the impact of whatever private fury or dismissal was about to be unleashed. Inside the cramped, windowless office, the silence stretched thick and unbearable, dramatically contrasting with the constant din of the kitchen just outside the thin, dry wall. Clara Vance did not start with a reprimand. She started with a name. Leo, she stated, her voice a rough, unfamiliar rasp. Maya's breath hitched. That was the boy's name. The small, tearful face that had haunted her sleep. Clara continued, her eyes focused on a spot just past Maya's shoulder, avoiding direct contact, detailing the events of the previous day with the dry, factual precision of a police report. She spoke of the abduction attempt, the frantic hours, the gut-wrenching realization that Marcus Thorne, the man who had lost his rights to the boy, had acted on his threat. Maya stood rigid, convinced Clara was relaying the story as a general warning about disruption, a prelude to her dismissal, until Clara's composure finally fractured. She pulled her hands apart, revealing deeply dug nail marks in her palms, and her eyes finally focused on Maya, now brimming with an unbearable, raw grief. He told me that without your license plate number, they wouldn't have found them until it was too late. He was already on the highway. She paused, then choked out the next words, shattering the entire framework of Maya's understanding. That boy, Leo Vance, he's my son, Maya. He is my son. The revelation hit Maya with the force of a physical blow. The intimidating, emotionally distant and ruthlessly efficient owner of the entire chain, Clara Vance, was the mother of the vulnerable child she had rescued. The boss, the figure of authority Maya had always kept at a respectful professional distance, was the person whose life Maya had saved. The juxtaposition was jarring, cinematic, and profoundly moving. Clara Vance, now completely undone, leaned forward, resting her forehead on her clasped hands, the severe black suit unable to contain the violent trembling of her shoulders as she finally allowed herself to cry, releasing the tidal wave of fear and exhaustion she had been suppressing for hours. Maya, witnessing this raw emotional arc, forgot the professional boundary instantly. She moved not as an employee, but as a fellow human being who had shared a terrifying moment in time with the woman before her. She didn't offer a platitude or a stiff comfort. She simply placed her hand gently on Clara's back, a gesture of silent, unreserved solidarity. It was a profound shift. The high-powered boss who had seemed untouchable was suddenly just a mother, terrified and grateful, and Maya was no longer just a server, but a savior, who had unknowingly protected the very person who signed her paycheck. The silence in the small office was now heavy with shared trauma and the dawning realization of an unforeseen, unbreakable bond. The confrontation Maya had feared had transformed into the most unexpected and powerful alliance of her life, and the true, devastating emotional cost of Clara Vance's seemingly distant demeanor was finally laid bare. Clara slowly regained her composure, wiping her tears with the heel of her hand. The next phase of the conversation was an essential investigative digression, filling in the crucial background context that Maya needed to fully grasp the gravity of the danger she had intervened against. Clara, now speaking with the clear, fact-heavy tone of a woman who had been fighting a legal and personal war for years, explained the excruciating details of the custody battle. Marcus Thorne, Leo's paternal uncle, had initially been granted supervised visitation rights, a decision Clara had fought fiercely, knowing his history of unstable behavior and attempts to alienate Leo from her. The red mark Maya had observed on Leo's wrist was a subtle but tragic confirmation of Thorne's escalating aggression. Just 3 weeks prior, a judge had finally revoked Thorne's visitation permanently based on new evidence of erratic behavior, pushing Thorne to the brink. The abduction attempt was not a spontaneous decision, but a meticulously planned act of retaliation, designed to cause maximum pain and disappear Leo permanently. Thorne had lured Leo from his supervised daycare using a forged note, an act of calculated malice that Maya's swift observation had intercepted. Clara revealed that she had intentionally kept her personal life fiercely guarded, maintaining the rigid impersonal demeanor at work precisely because of the ongoing volatile custody threat. She couldn't risk any emotional slip-up or personal information leaking into her professional sphere, afraid that it might be used against her or compromise Leo's safety. This realization instantly reframed Maya's entire perception of her boss. The coldness she had interpreted as managerial severity was, in fact, an armor of absolute maternal protection. The vulnerability of the previous night, the fear of losing her son forever, had momentarily cracked that armor, and the truth of her quiet desperation poured out. The distance between the owner and the employee collapsed entirely. Maya, in turn, explained her simple instinctual actions. The moment she saw the silent tears, the feeling that she had to break the connection between the man and the child, and the desperate, precise effort to secure the license plate number. It was a rhythmic back and forth, the two women weaving their perspectives, the victim's mother and the savior, into a complete, horrifying, and ultimately resolute narrative. A profound, immediate bond, forged in a shared crisis, was established, a connection that transcended the power dynamic of their professional roles. Clara looked at Maya, no longer seeing a 22-year-old waitress, but a young woman who had displayed extraordinary courage and presence of mind, a fact which now informed the immediate, undeniable sense of gratitude and obligation that Clara felt towards her. The open loop of the mystery, why the man and the boy were together, was closed, replaced by a hopeful emotional tone. With the context firmly established, the story moves into its final phase, detailing the necessary resolution and the beginning of a new normal. Marcus Thorne was charged with kidnapping, facing serious time, and the immediate custody of Leo was permanently secured with Clara. The legal and emotional wars were finally won, thanks to the observational skills and quick reflexes of a minimum-wage worker. Clara Vance, the business magnate, was now focused entirely on repaying a debt that she knew could never truly be settled. She offered Maya a significant financial reward, enough to cover her current university tuition and pay off lingering debts, and a promotion to assistant manager with a substantial raise and benefits, a professional leap Maya hadn't even considered. Maya accepted the tuition funds and the raise, seeing it not as a payment for heroism, but as a practical acknowledgement of the immense risk she had taken. She declined the management title, preferring the rhythm of the floor and the freedom it afforded her, proving that her actions were driven by instinct, not ambition. The new working dynamic between the two women was subtle, but undeniable. Clara treated Maya with an almost familial respect, often pausing to have quiet, genuine conversations that went beyond the day's schedules, marking the dissolution of the old, intimidating professional boundary. The final crucial scene that defines the new relationship takes place a week later, back in the bustling, ordinary chaos of the daily grind. It is 10:30 a.m., and the coffee machine hisses its usual tune. Clara Vance enters, but this time she is not wearing the severe black suit of authority. She is dressed casually, holding the hand of Leo Vance, who is now smiling, clutching his rescued toy spaceship, and looking happy and secure. Clara brings him over to the counter where Maya is making a latte. Leo looks up at Maya, his eyes bright and full of the innocent gratitude only a child can truly express, and he hands her a small, brightly colored drawing of a waitress with a cape. Maya kneels down, accepts the drawing, and shares a deep, silent look with Clara across the counter, a look that acknowledged the terrible danger, the successful rescue, and the unexpected, profound connection they now share. It was a matter-of-fact delivery with cinematic flair, a testament to how ordinary people can become heroes in the most mundane of settings. The story of the waitress who saved the crying child and found out his mom was her boss concludes not with dramatic fireworks, but with a quiet, lasting joy of safety restored and a bond forged in fire, a powerful reminder that vigilance, empathy, and courage often reside in the unassuming spaces of everyday life. This is how it unfolded, a story of two women whose paths were destined to collide in a moment of crisis.